Hey guys, so today we're going to be working through the third webinar, which is basically Healthy Minds, the 4 levels of explanation, and the application in ethics. So how can we integrate the 4 levels of explanation? So what are the 4 levels firstly? So we've got biological, basic processes, person, and then socio-cultural. You guys should already know this. I'm sure you've looked at it already in the past topics. But why do we have them? So human behavior is studied from many aspects, and these 4 levels help us break down and understand it. So what's the best way to remember them? So I find the cake analogy is the best way to remember them. So I pair the biological with the ingredients of a cake, the basic processes with mixing and baking, and your socio-cultural, so the reasons for the cake, so the birthdays, and this and that and the other. And then your personal, which is the flavor of the cake, so chocolate. This diagram is very helpful, so look through that and just understand that each of them relate back to, you know, an actual meaning, not just butter, sugar, eggs, and flour. But just consider that because it's very helpful in the exam. I remember using it in my Year 12 exam. I was like, what is biological? Ingredients. That's what it was. So I'm not going to go through it too much, but I'm going to bring these slides up so you guys can look through it and pause and go back because I know you've already learned about each of them in the different topics. So I'm going to leave these up there, and there's many handouts to help you with that as well. So we've got biological here. We've got our socio-cultural level, you know, your social environment influencing behavior, your social networking, the Western and Eastern culture, and so on. So just pause this slide as well if you wanted to get a further in-depth meaning behind that all. We've got basic processes, so, you know, your processes that vary from perception, learning processes, and stressful life events. Once again, pause the slide if you need to go into a little bit further. And then we've got our person level, so your individual differences from your age, your gender, and your personality. So, sorry for my cough. We've got our handouts now. So these handouts I sort of created myself based on the curriculum. And they're very, very helpful to relate back your 4 levels to your risk and protective factors here. And then your 4 levels against anxiety and depression. So I'm going to quickly grab those handouts up for you now. So the first handout here is your factors affecting resilience, your risk and protective factors against your 4 levels, so your biological, basic processes, and the rest are further down. So it basically has a great in-depth explanation there, and the same deal here with your handout too. I'm going to get these popped onto the portal. Alicia and Lauren will put links up there, and you guys can definitely access these. They're perfect for studying and understanding and relating your 4 levels to the topic. And yeah, so basically that's it with regard to my handouts, but they'll be popped on the portal soon. I'll quickly go back to the actual presentation, if it will load up, and then, so we're going to talk about ethics quickly. So, our diagnosis. So only a professional trained in psychiatric classification can make a formal diagnosis. Diagnosis is based on the medical model in the DSM that we looked at in the previous PowerPoint, so extensive training in the recognition of symptoms, causes, signs, and treatments is needed before diagnosing mental health disorders. So we want to look at the stigma. So what is stigma? It's the what's the stigma related around your mental diagnosis. So it can be both helpful and harmful. So many feel relieved to receive a diagnosis as it explains symptoms and gives hope for treatment, but it may be harmful as it carries a stigma. The person being labelled may hide the illness and become ashamed of who they are. They may find hard to get employment, make friends once labelled. Prejudice against people with mental illness is widespread in society. It makes it difficult for people to feel like they belong, may be targeted or of discrimination or abuse. The media are guilty of labelling mentally ill people as mad, bad, or sad. Ignorance breeds fear, and this is a negative consequence for people with a mental illness. But what you guys need to know is that the media is all, you know, nonsense basically. It's just created for shock effect. And then in that, you just need to understand that having a mental illness does not define who you are, and that the stigma can be changed as well very easily. And so we're going to look at ethics. So there's some ethics here that you've already looked at in past topics, like informed consent, and then you've got withdrawal rights, confidentiality, and voluntary participation. These are things you've already looked at, so I don't want to go into too much depth of them, but just know that they're obviously going to come up in your exam, they're going to come up in tests, they're the key elements to ethics, basically. And we're just going to look at the ethicalness, the ethics of treatment. So if a person is considered a danger to themselves or others, they can be detained be detained. So voluntary psychiatric wards in hospitals must ensure no harm comes to patients. So historically, institutions did not care for the well-being of people with mental illness. So society has an ethical responsibility to uphold the dignity of people with a mental illness. So historically, this hasn't happened. 60 years ago, you know, you were crazy, you were mad. But now there's a better understanding of it. So people are a little bit more forthcoming and accepting of mental health illnesses because there's nothing, there's no stigma attached to them as much as there used to be. And then now we're just going to quickly look at our assessment of these mental disorders. So we do that through our research design. So we've got our experimental, our quantitative observational, and our qualitative, and each dot points relates to things that you could do within the topic of healthy minds, but within these research designs. So scan over those dot points, pause the slide, and just understand those a little bit. And then the same thing for the assessment measures. So you've got your objective quantitative, your subjective quantitative, and then your qualitative. So all these are still relatable to your other topics, but these are just more related to your healthy mind. So here's the dot points for those, and just have a suss of each one, and see if you can take in some of that. The evaluating research methods and designs, the ethical issues little thing here, just go in your own time and then just have a look over those because they're very, very interesting with regard to your assessment measures. So it's good to have that in the back of your mind through your exam. So with the exam hints, what I want to say is the levels of explanation are key to the curriculum statement. So the topics are in the curriculum in order to illustrate a particular level of explanation. Students never get an exam question that requires a level of explanation different to the one the topic is designed to illustrate. So the examiners are looking for an understanding of a particular level of explanation in the student's answer. So that's basically all in this slideshow, but in the next one we're just going to quickly look at our psychological interventions. So I'll stop this one now and then we'll move on to webinar 4 in just one moment.